Hi, my name is Orie, and I would like to welcome all those joining us tonight. We really appreciate your presence and wanting to help us grow and fortify our community. Today, we are here to share the insights and perspectives of our community members in hopes to shed light upon a multitude of social and personal experiences in order to facilitate a greater understanding within our own community, which is of the utmost importance during such a tumultuous time. Today, we will be asking each panelist specific questions regarding their own personal experiences. Our mission today is we wish to achieve interviewing each panelist that diversity ambassadors want to promote discussions around equality, diversity, and personal identity. And we are happy to start this at the beginning of Black History Month. We would also like to give a special thanks to Mr. Newberry and Mr. Bembry being so supportive through this entire process. Let us get started.
Thank you, Lauren. That was a very good introduction. I want to thank all the panelists who are here tonight. They're going to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves in a little bit. And then also thank my student diversity ambassadors, Lauren, Yumna, Amber, and Stacy. They've done a fantastic job of putting this together, and they will introduce themselves also as they start to ask questions of the panelists. So with no further ado, we can start.
All right, hi everyone, I'm Amber. I'm a senior at Lakes. I'm one of the co-founders of the Diversity Ambassador Program. And first, I just want to ask each of the panelists to briefly introduce yourself and share your background in regards to equity, diversity, and inclusion. Mr. Gomez, do you want to go first?
Hi everyone, my name is Lorenzo Gomez. I am a teacher and former Lake student. I was part of that first graduating class back in '07. I'm a coach as well, and I teach currently U.S. History and Global Studies. My work with like diversity and inclusion probably starts back at the former school I was working at in the city, and yeah, I mean, since the inception of like the first diversity dialogue that I was a part of at my last school, I thought it was a good idea to start something similar here at Lakes, and essentially just kind of providing a space for students to kind of share their experiences of what it's like, to be in the minority at a school. And aside from that, just like when it comes to teaching history as well, I am definitely intentional in making sure that I'm telling and sharing stories and perspectives of major players in our histories from all backgrounds.
Thank you. Ms. Willis, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name's Wendy Willis. I work at Abbott, been there for 20 years, from the south side of Chicago. And I went to Whitney Young High School, which our illustrious former First Lady Michelle Obama went to. And I then went to Northwestern for undergraduate engineering program. And then I went to North Carolina for my MBA. I've been with a handful of companies, most recently Abbott for 20 years. And within Abbott and some of the other companies, I was very active in their diversity and inclusion networks. At Abbott, I ran the Black Business Network for, I guess, about 7 or 8 years. I'm also a part of the Women Leaders in Action as well. And then I've also recruited for Abbott and other companies, specifically for African Americans. So being in corporate America, I am usually one of a few. And especially in my area, which was operations and engineering, although I do see, no, not really. So I'm usually in quality and regulatory now, and yet and still I'm still one of the few African Americans in that field as well.
Thank you. Makai, do you want to go next?
Hey guys, I'm Kai. I'm a senior at Lakes Community High School. I am African American, and I also identify as bisexual, so self-minority. I moved out here about like almost 4 years ago. It'll be 4 years in June. I moved from the north side of Chicago. So just like transitioning from like an area that's highly populated with different types of people to like an area where, you're used to seeing the same skin tone and, living in a wealthier area, it's a little bit different, but I just, kind of live day by day and keep pushing through it. That's really it. Oh, you may know me. I am also a cheerleader at Lake, so that's how a lot of people know with Aryanne. So hey, Aryanne. Hey, Lauren. Hey, guys. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks, Makai. Ms. Cherestal?
Hi, so my name is Asra Cherestal, and I teach math at Lakes Community High School. This is my 9th year teaching, my sixth year at Lakes. So I don't have nearly as much experience working in like equity, diversion, and inclusion, but my background is a little bit from that in that I also grew up in Chicago, spent all of my teenage years there. Prior to teaching at Lakes, I taught Charter High School in the north side of Chicago. I went to Mather High School, which is again a very diverse school where over 50 languages were spoken throughout. So, and a little bit of work that I've done, I was part of the Equal Opportunity Schools Committee at Lakes when it existed, and I've just attended some equity trainings through professional developments offered by our school, and have been part of a few conversations around equity with colleagues. Personally, I am passionate about it. My kids are biracial. My husband is Haitian American. I'm Pakistani American. So, and then I work with students. So, where I think that I can make a difference.
Thank you. Aryanne?
Hi, I'm Aryanne. I'm currently a junior at Lakes. My background is I'm Asian, specifically Filipino. I'm also first generation, which is pretty cool. My background with working with diversity and all that is I am part of FASA at D117, which is the Filipino American Students Association. And in that club, we learn to basically embrace your race, whether you're Filipino or not, and just learning to love your background.
Thank you. And next, Ms. Barbatos.
Hey everyone. My name's Allena Barbato, and I've got 2 girls at Lakes. I got a freshman and a junior, and they're loving it. I am an attorney and a therapist, and you asked what my first experience was in working with these issues. It's probably when I was a juvenile public defender, and I would defend criminal cases involving racial profiling, which means if somebody was pulled over where racial profiling was used, I would try to get it thrown out, and as that's not something that should have been done at the time, and we were successful and made people follow the law. So that was really exciting and very interesting work, and that's where I started my work on the topics of diversity. And I saw the effects of racism could do, especially in the criminal justice system. And because of that, I decided to move into therapy. So I did that for a while. I have a master's degree in, as well as a JD, I have a master's degree in psychological services. And I wanted to work directly with people to make a difference. And now I am at the College of Lake County. I'm the Title IX coordinator, which is the federal law against sexual harassment in higher education. I'm also the American with Disabilities coordinator, the chair of the Accessibility and Inclusion Subcommittee, which is part of the Diversity Council. I just finished drafting our new anti-discrimination and harassment policy and procedures, where I handle complaints and claims of racial slurs, LGBTQ harassment, sexual harassment, cyberbullying, and so on through first our behavioral intervention team. So I get the complaints, filter them down, and then send them to the appropriate place, and then I sort of prosecute them in that way, whether it's racial slur, sexual harassment, whatever the case may be. I'm also currently working on a big pillar of our college plan is an equity plan, and totally recalling our Americans with Disabilities Act accessibility inclusion piece of it, doing a lot of work there, as well as chairing hiring committees where we have to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you. Mr. Bembry?
Hi there. My name is Marvin Bembry, and I'm excited to be here tonight. And I would just like to give a shout out to the Superintendent McKay, and Mr. Newberry for your leadership, and also for the students who are leading this subject and leading this conversation tonight. And just want to shout out to you. Very impressed with you. I've had a 30-year corporate career working for large organizations, healthcare, pharmaceutical, and the IT services space. I've also worked as a loan executive from one of those companies to work with colleges and universities and fortune companies, large companies, to increase the number of African Americans in engineering. And part of my corporate career, which has been in HR, which has been in training, which has been in government affairs, pretty eclectic career, part of that has also been spent in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. I've actually trained maybe thousands of people throughout over 3 continents in these concepts. And so that's just a little bit about me from a professional level. At a personal level, though, I've lived this as a Black male here in the United States. I've lived diversity, inclusion, and it's not just something I do. It's a way of life. It's a way of thinking. Thank you.
All right, that's all. If we move on to the questions.
The questions for Mr. Gomez, Miss Willis, Machi, Miss Cherestal, Aryanne, Miss Barbato, and Mr. Bembry is: what personal experience have you had that has helped develop your understanding of equity, diversity, and inclusion?
I just want to pick one.
Mr. Bembry, what personal experience have you had that has helped develop your understanding of equity, diversity, and inclusion?
Well, I've lived this as a Black male here in this country, at least the other side of the table. I was very fortunate, though. I think at a very early age to began to sense the issues around disparity, hearing the voices of the 1960s and all of that represented, the civil unrest, the Martin Luther King, all of those kinds of things. I happened to grow up, although significantly in poverty, but happened to grow up in a pretty diverse area. And I could never figure out in my little mind why people would be prejudiced toward people just because of the color of their skin. And that kind of stuck with me. That little sense of justice stuck with me over my life. And I had an opportunity while I was in a very large IT services company to be one of the pioneers in the 90s to set up our diversity program, to teach and to train, to travel and to train people, managers, leaders, as well as individual performers in the organization about diversity and about inclusion and about equity. And I think part of that learning experience or that personal experience for me was just the personal knowledge that I had to gain through the experiential process of becoming certified to really flesh out those concepts, not just as talking points, but as understanding how it works, how it impacts one's life, and ultimately how to begin to live those concepts. And so I guess that would be how I would answer that. One, experientially living it as a Black male growing up in a very challenging time in the country. And then as I got ready to add value to others, the deep, deep personal growth work that had to be done in me in order to be able to add value to others. Thank you.
I can go next. So for me, my personal experience, I would say similar to Mr. Bembry here is, just living through it, being Mexican American and from, growing up for the first 11 years of my life, in a predominantly Mexican and immigrant neighborhood, and then moving to up here at Lindenhurst once I hit middle school and just being in a predominantly white neighborhood in town, to my experiences in college and being, the only Mexican American on the football team, in my classes. I was in a fraternity in my fraternity. And then even to this day, right, there's not too many teachers that look like me or have a similar background to me. And, being able to live through those experiences and navigating these different worlds, I've been able to meet tons of people from, all over the world in different cultures and different ethnicities, different races, white, Black, Asian, other Latinos. I have, different friend groups. And I think that has helped me see and understand like the beauty diversity really is and what it's like to learn from people of different cultures and kind of listen and hear about their experiences, and in turn they listen and hear about mine. I think the friendships and the people that I've met along the way have kind of pushed me towards doing this type of work, because I feel like it's been a blessing for myself that I've been able to be open-minded, and like some of the experiences that I've had and shared with people of diverse backgrounds, to me that's what motivates me, because I think if everyone sort of saw the beauty in each other and in our differences, the world would be a better place. So that's kind of how my personal experience has pushed me to kind of to participate and engage in this type of work.
I could go next. So my personal experience, I believe that my whole life has been a personal experience in my eyes because there's different situations that I go through or that other African Americans may go through that, just help develop you as a character. But most recently, I would say that it was around the time when George Floyd was first killed and the video surfaced. So I took the initiative to coordinate a walk downtown Antioch. And the amount of people that came, like I was just expecting like maybe like 50 people at max, but it was probably almost 1,000 people there of all different races, all different age groups. I met the treasurer for the Secretary of State. I met pastors. I met so many different people in the community of so many different races. And it was just a beautiful thing to see. And it really helped me see that, we aren't the only people that see an issue and that want the change. And it makes me feel better and it makes me hopeful for not just my generation, but the generations that are coming, because racism is not a new thing. It has been going on for as long as African Americans have been here, you know what I mean? So just seeing that step in the right direction, and just Mr. Newberry, like the conversations we've had and the amount of support he's shown me and the amount of chances he's given me, not even just him, but his host as well, all the deans, all the teachers, it's just a really beautiful thing to see.
I can go next. So for me personally, I immigrated to America when I was 13, and the area in the north side of Chicago where we lived was a very diverse area. The school I went to, there were many other students that were immigrants. So for me, it was actually not until my kids are now starting to grow up and I moved out here to a northern suburb that is not as diverse as where I grew up, that I realized that there needs to be more work done. So like the school that I worked at prior to this and the school that I went to, about 80% of the student population was of color, about 90% of the students came from low income, and there's definitely, lack of resources and opportunities, but I always saw that as the bigger problem until we moved here. My son's currently in 8th grade, and he's a student of color, and for example, he's the only student of color in his advanced math class since 5th grade. And he's got like 20 some students in his class. And so when you see that, you see like there has to be more work done. He's not about 20 to 30% of the student population is of color. So why is that not represented in his advanced classes is a question and some work that we need to do and think about. So yeah. So I think moving out here and seeing that, I see a lot more of that here and realize that there needs to be more work done as opposed to while I was growing up. Sure.
Thank you. I think that'll be enough for that question. So our next question for you guys is, what does equality, diversity, and inclusion mean to you? So we can start with Ms. Willis.
So I don't know if I have great definitions for all of them, but I do recognize the difference in some of those words. So, equity just means, everyone has access to the same opportunities. To me, diversity means you just have all types, different backgrounds and races. But what's the other one? The one that I feel, inclusion. That's where, you get to do you actually feel included? Diversity to me is, you have everyone gathered, but you're not listening or valuing others. Inclusion, you actually feel like you are being included, you're being valued, your opinion matters. And then I don't think you use the word celebrated, but you never really see celebrated, where you're actually, asked and a real part of the party. Inclusion is, to me, that you're just, you're at least being recognized. But diversity is, you just have a lot of people in the room who are diverse in nature. But that, to me, it needs to go further than that to more of an inclusion where you're valued and you can share and learn from each other. Celebrated is off the, you know, I never see that. So it's a nice wishful thought.
Thank you. Anyone else want to answer the question?
I'll answer. So diversity, I agree with Mr. Willis. It's just, you know, different people from different ethnic backgrounds, all together. And it really is a beautiful thing to see. I've been in several places where there was all types of people, and just the amount of joy that it has to just, you know, interact with one another, even though me as an African American male may not have the same experience as Aryanne, who is a Filipino woman, you know what I mean? So just being able to share those, you know, experiences is really great. Equity, just pretty much everyone is equal. There's a lot of times the perception that the white man gets a head start. I don't think that should be the case. I believe if you work for it, you should get it, regardless of your skin color, regardless of who you are, what you identify as, what you believe in. You should have those same rights. And inclusion, that just pretty much means like, no matter what you identify as, you will be accepted. And I feel a lot of times that's misunderstood, that inclusion just means that everybody can be there, but not only do you have to be there, but you have to feel respected.
Let me just add a little bit additional to what the two previous have said, some really good things there. I think one of the things I would add is that when we talk about equity, we're really not talking about equality per se, but equity in this sense is really about the ability to recognize the inherent differentiators that lead to a flawed and disparate results. And it's really working harder to make a difference, especially for those people who need a difference made. And that's, I think, a really important element to this whole discussion, because not everyone needs the same thing. And equity creates that, the view of equity looks to create that based on the needs of the people that are at play. I think from a diversity standpoint, it really is obviously about those things that are different, or people that are different. And it can be race, it can be gender, it can be a whole number of things, but different than perhaps the dominant social construct. Inclusion is really also about the culture, right? It's about the culture that allows, whether in a building, in a school building, or in an organization, that allows someone to bring their full and authentic self into play without the need of forced assimilation, right? Someone said diversity is about, you know, people coming to the dance, but inclusion is about really being invited to the dance. And as Ms. Willis said, being celebrated in that process. I'll just add that as additional fodder to the previous two who have spoken.
Ms. Barbatos, would you mind answering the question too, please?
Sure, I was just about to jump in. Wendy and Marvin referred to celebrating, the piece of celebrating with inclusion. And right now in higher ed, these concepts are at the forefront of what we're doing. As some of you might know, I see you shaking your head, Marvin, we just passed a law in higher ed that allows colleges to take a different look at scores and other admission materials if you're a Black American, or African American, or Black. And I think that is a much needed remedy to the disparity that they've experienced in higher ed. So just there's that piece that's happening right now in higher ed, and how that it's supposed to be implemented, I believe, next year, May next year. So we'll see how colleges are scrambling over this next year to get that into place. Very important law everybody should know about. So because of the light being shown on these words and these definitions, and everybody scrambling to sort of reach a higher plateau allowing, equity, diversity, and inclusion. We've got a lot of trainings, and our most recent training, again, is on hiring folks and looking at these issues. And the one thing it just made me smile is when it's talked about inclusion and celebration. The one thing that kind of like made sense to me was that not only are you invited to the dance, but you're also asked, what kind of music do you want to listen to? What kind of food do you want to eat? What do you like? Not just putting up with, what everybody else in the room might want to listen to, but like, hey, what are you interested in? How can we make you feel welcome here? And that makes sense to me because I like to dance and I like to eat food.
Amber, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. So this can be open to anyone or everyone if they want to answer. What is something that you feel is frequently overlooked or misunderstood about your community that you would want to share?
I wanted to answer. I know I just spoke. I'm sorry, but I feel like I don't feel like I am a Lake Villa trustee, and in fact, I have a meeting that just started 2 minutes ago. But I would rather be with y'all right in this moment. And what we're going to be talking about is our comprehensive plan. And one of the pieces of information that's in our comprehensive plan is a breakdown of the ethnicities in Lake Villa, and I just wanted to share that so that everybody kind of knew what we're talking about. And that is that we are 84% white alone is how it's described, 12% Latinx, and 6% Asian. So Asra, you were right on with, you're pretty close to the proportions there. So that is our makeup of our community. What folks might not know about what's going on, I don't know if I can answer that, but I just thought I'd throw out those specific facts so that we knew what we were talking about. We knew what we were looking at.
Did you say percentage Black? Did I miss that one?
It didn't break down on that. I know, I was wondering that too. I didn't see that figure on there. So I thought that was really odd. I'm actually going to ask that question when I go on later.
One of the things I think was the question overlooked, or what I find odd is that when in corporate America, when you see someone Black, it tends to, the belief is, they may not be as qualified as, their counterparts, where in reality, they're probably overqualified. In relation to their counterparts too. But I mean, the assumption is, oh, maybe they got, here and you've lowered your criteria for them, or, that type of situation. And a lot of people believe that, whereas, I probably have twice as much experience as my counterpart, but it's an act of God to get to, similar levels, that they are at. So I think, that's the assumption, that I just sort of slipped in and lasted for 20 years, that I don't have the same experience as the exact opposite. So.
I would say, well, I wouldn't really say it's overlooked, but in a sense it is. Well, I just feel like a lot of times, especially what I've noticed from my peers at the school, is that they live for the Kendrick Lamars, the Travis Scott, the Lil Uzis, like playing the music all the time, African Americans at that. But then when it comes to situations like the George Floyd or Breonna Taylor, they don't want to address it, or they just act like it's not a real thing. And then when you inform them that, racial profiling is a thing, they want to say it's not because they don't go through it. One thing I would say is that just because it's not happening to you doesn't mean that it's not happening. There's situations all over the world and all over the country. It's just crazy. And it's like, you can really sit up here and tell me that you don't see an issue, but yet you live for our culture. You live for when waves were like big, you would see these our counterparts were our counterparts taking the image and putting it on themselves or onto Caucasian faculty members. But then again, it's like they don't really. It confuses me and it makes me a little bit hurt. But I mean, so,
I'll take a stab at that as well, if you'd like. I think that one of the things that's overlooked and misunderstood about, and I'm going to just put it in air quotes, the Black community, is that being Black in America does not inherently equate to homogeneity. In other words, the Black community of sorts, if there really is a quote unquote Black community, is diverse. There's a lot of different opinions and even perspectives within the quote unquote community. And so sometimes in times like this, like post George Floyd, et cetera, people are asked about perspective. Well, sometimes it's difficult to speak for an entire community for just one person. Now, having said that, there's also an inherent tension there, because although there is diversity among most people who are Black in this country, there is also some areas of commonalities. So there's a tension there, and I'm not sure that nuance is clearly understood. I think the other piece that's often overlooked, or perhaps not even known, not just overlooked, but is not even known, is the extent to which Black people in this country are affected by the insidious nature of racism, such that it becomes a kind of perpetual hurdle to cross in terms of how you grow and how you develop your offspring. When I say Black people affected by the insidious nature of racism, you might wonder, oh, I'm not sure about that, but absolutely, not from the standpoint of it being the recipients of it being perpetrated on us, but in the fact that we also ourselves living in this country where it is baked into the system, also at times have to deal with having accepted unconsciously and unknowingly some of the same elements of the insidious nature of racism. For example, one of the thoughts, and in fact, Ms. Wendy just mentioned it, is this notion that many of us have adopted, has been passed down to us by well-meaning peers and parents and others, is that you have to be twice as good, right? You have to be twice as good in order to, there's a couple of different endings on that. You have to be twice as good. One ending is you have to be twice as good to get half as far. And then another is you have to be twice as good to even, get to a place of parity. But I just want you to imagine, and what's not understood by that is the burden that places on people. And that's an element of the insidious nature of racism that people have inculcated within themselves and then passed on to succeeding generations. So these are some things that perhaps are not known, not understood, but these are additional hurdles that people of color often have to face that may not be known about by others who haven't had those experiences.
Yeah, and actually, before I get to that, what both Mr. Bembry and Ms. Willis shared reminds me of a great Chris Rock bit. I don't know if we have Chris Rock fans here, a stand-up comedian and actor, where he mentions, like, he lists all his accomplishments, right, that he's had throughout his career. And, he talks about the neighborhood he lives in, and like Jay-Z lives in that neighborhood, et cetera. And then he just points out the fact that his neighbor, nowhere near as accomplished as he is just a dentist. But as a dentist, he can afford to live next to Chris Rock. So that's what that bit was playing out in my head. And so I recommend you watch that bit. It's very insightful by Chris Rock. And then along with the same vein is, like, for me, being Mexican American, first generation, there is this, for especially on Mexican Americans and just Latin Americans in general, this we're viewed as monolithic, right?
Yeah.
Like we're all supposed to think and feel and believe the same thing. We're supposed to vote one way over the other. We're supposed to like certain policies over the other. We're supposed to look a certain way. Oftentimes, if someone doesn't look brown, so like let's say it's a white a Latin American or a black
Right.
Latino, like they're like, oh, you're not Mexican or you're not this and that, right?
Right.
But the question is never like put in reverse. In other words, like no one ever questions the dominant culture in society, like why, um, in regards of race, right? Like for white America, it's okay for white America to be whether Republican or Democrat or Catholic or Jewish, etc. Right? You have this diversity within white America, but when it comes to Latin Americans or any other minority group, it's often just assumed
Yeah.
that we believe certain things and we stick to that, and it's kind of dictated at us.
Yeah.
For our last general question to the panelists, what are some things that you have experienced, whether it be with people or different instances of ignorance, indifference, insensitivity, or outright oppression towards your cultural identification or your diversity characteristics?
I'll take this one. There's been a lot. I don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure I am the only African American male in my grade. There was another student, but she transferred. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, if I done my calculations right, that I am the only African American male. So just that alone is like, wow. And there was a situation in particular that I remember. I was actually in the locker room getting ready for practice. And a student, it wasn't said directly to me, but I was in the vicinity. A student had made a comment about the KKK. Now, first off, that's not something to joke about. So me moving here, my main goal was to better myself. I used to I used to be a handful. So really just developing me as a person. So I took a situation and I went to a faculty member, someone who I thought was, going to have my back on this situation. When I brought it up to him, he said he'll take care of it. 3 days later, or no, it was actually 2 days later, he had a conversation with the student, pretty much saying that no, nothing was going to be done about the situation. Um, so for me, that was a little bit hurting because it's like you're always told, okay, tell the teacher, okay, let an adult know, a trusted adult, let them know. But then it's like when you do that, you don't get the outcomes that should be, because I mean, I feel as though, I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel as though that's not something that should be taken lightly. On top of that, there was a situation last year that happened with a student, and it was through social media. So me personally, he lives in my neighborhood, so I could have, kind of took that approach, that kind of stereotypical African American approach, and that we're always portrayed as the aggressors in situations, stuff like that. Instead, I took those measures and went to the dean. Now, this situation, it was a better outcome, but then after he got his repercussions, his parents came up to the school. So it was just like, wow, like, it was like we were going in the right direction, but then for a parent to come and then, it kind of just disputes well, not everything, because he still did get consequences, but it was in my eyes, it was played down. So that's just,
I'll go on this. So this is from my personal experience, and now I see my older son, my younger son's a toddler. He's not school aged yet, so my older son faces a little bit of that. So my family immigrated to the United States in 2000, summer of 2000, from Pakistan, and I felt like not a lot of people knew where Pakistan was, geography-wise, cultural-wise. Like people weren't familiar. People know India, but they didn't really know where Pakistan was. And then 9/11 happened, and Pakistan was all over the news. And so people for a long time, while I was growing up, would associate 9/11 with Pakistan, and that is all they would talk about. So it was hard to talk about the Pakistani culture or being a Pakistani without it being associated with religious extremism for a long time. Even my son, as I said, he's in 8th grade, and he's been called a terrorist at more than one occasion. So yeah.
So I've had many experiences. They aren't all as dangerous and overt as the Black man may experience, but I mean, you learn the code switch early. I mean, like 6, 7 years old, because I've already seen my daughter do it. Where you have to appease. You grow up in a Black area, and then you're all of a sudden the only one, and your tone changes, your dialect changes, your comfort level changes, and I don't know about any others, but I mean, I immediately count how many Black people are in the room the second I step in. So so that's just habit. But I've been followed. I was in a apartment community, and one of the Los Motorcycle Harley Davidson with the little bar mustache guy couldn't understand why I would be there. So he followed me out to make sure I made my way out safely, apparently. I had coworkers who would have to drive home with me or follow me home to make sure I got it. And this was just like in Crown Point, Indiana, next there. I've always questioned why I'm in first class. I used to travel a lot, and so I'd be in first class, and it's assumption like, well, why is she in first class? Why is she there? And every time I walk into a room with a new team, the criteria of how you're here, the first question I get, oh, so what's your background? And I just ask them, it's like, what specifically are you asking me? Because I didn't hear you ask anyone else what their background is. It's just like, so do you want me to spew out my schools? Because yes, they're probably better than yours. But what is it that you're asking me so I can help you get to the point, But I was like, we're 10 people here, and I'm the only one you asked what my background was. So, you have that all the time, where you just have to defend. And I wear Northwestern stuff a lot because I'm 25 years season ticket holder of football. But I specifically wear it when I'm going to meet new people. They can get to the quick assumption of, I am not stupid, so let's jump past that and have a normal conversation. So today I had to go to the vet with my dog, and I was like, don't speak to me like I'm stupid. Let's just jump over to I'm educated so we can have a normal conversation. But I mean, I actually have to pick my clothes daily based on what you're doing because I am representing an entire race, and I may have new people in which I have to make a statement before we have a conversation. So.
I think for myself, like others, I can have countless of examples, but probably the scariest one for me, and I do think about it every now and then, especially anytime, we see an unarmed Black person get shot by law enforcement. After I graduated from Lakes, like maybe 2 weeks out from graduation, my friends and I, we were at Lewis Park, for those of you familiar with Lyndhurst, right? It's on Beck Road. And it was, a group of us, at that time, It's hard to believe, but Lakes was less racially and ethnically diverse. And so it was maybe a group of six of us, all, Black or Mexican kids. All of us are going to college. Like we all graduated from Lakes. And a police officer, a Lyndhurst police officer, pulls up to Lewis Park and starts questioning us and says that he got a call saying that there were people swearing and dealing drugs at the park. And might have been the case, right? Like I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that maybe somebody in the neighborhood called the cops on us, claiming that we were selling drugs. And he had us there for about 15, 20 minutes questioning us, and we were adamant, like search the car, all these things, and eventually, right, he let it be. But I often like think to myself, like, what would have happened if that was the day that one of us decided to be stupid and make a mistake, either had alcohol on us or weed or something, right? We just graduated from high school, we're on our way to college, right? How easily we could have made that mistake that one day, and what could have happened to either myself or my friend, one of my friends. And so that was when it became very real to me, about like, I'm a big hip hop head, about some of the things that, I've heard some of my favorite rappers talk about, and artists and musicians. And obviously now we see with what's going on in today's society with Black Lives Matter and the movement. So that was a moment for me that at the time wasn't too scary, because like I felt like we had nothing to hide, right? But thinking back to it, it's like, man, what if that was the day we were like wanted to celebrate or something? You know what I'm saying? So it's just when one of these incidents happened, I just think back to that moment. Thankfully, one of my buddies who was there, his dad was a cop at Round Lake. And so a few days later, his dad made sure to get that cop to come over in his house and apologize to the group of us. But yeah, I mean, just scary things like that. That's probably the scariest moment that I have experienced in retrospect.
Sorry, I know you went for this, but I just wanted to add, so I mentioned my husband is, and this is not my experience, but I hear countless stories. My husband's a Black American. From him growing up and even now, incidents that happen. He's a police officer in a predominantly white, wealthy neighborhood, and somebody, when he was responding to a call, called the police on him that there's someone suspicious walking on the street. So just thinking like things that just blow my mind, like can happen and still happen to this day.
I just have something to add since we're on the topic of police. And it's fair. It is recent because it just happened last night. But I have a brother who used to go to Lakes. He graduated this past year. He goes to school in Aurora. I'm sorry, I can't say my R's, so hopefully you guys understand what I mean when I say Aurora. Yeah. So he goes to that school. And he was out with his friend who is not a person of color last night at around like 12 o'clock. And mind you, he wasn't driving. But they had got stopped by a police officer, and they questioned my brother who was in the passenger seat. Mind you, they're not doing anything. They're probably on the way back to the dorm. No legal substances in the car, no probable cause. And then the first thing that he did was address my brother, who is African American, and he's pretty scary looking. So I mean, it's just like, I don't understand how you can just look at somebody and then just automatically take into, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of weird, and especially in people who are on enforcement. It's like you should kind of be not taught, but like mentored through that, and there should be services in place to help with those situations to resolve that, hopefully. But yeah, that's just a quick.
He's probably not scary looking, but he's scary to some. You're on mute. Okay.
That makes sense. But he was on the football team, so he's like really muscular, and so it's like, you know, when you look at an African American male who's muscular built, and you know he doesn't dress like the typical African American does, but it's just like, you know, that really shouldn't be like.
That's not the criteria for scary looking, though.
It's kind of weird.
No, I understand what you're saying, but I mean, we're sort of, you know, conditioned to assume, you know, that they're scary, but they're not. He's a
really, like, anybody that knows my brother, you guys know, like, he has such a kind heart. He's such a kind-hearted person. Did not get into anything to do. I've literally me and him have been in the same school since we were in kindergarten. And he has not been in any trouble. He's been on honor rolls, had numerous awards and stuff like that. But it's like, you just look at somebody and then just put them in a box.
I'd like to add to all that's been said. There's just, you know, phenomenal and so right on. It's almost unusual to have a Black person experience life in this country and not experience some of the things that you all were just talking about. I've had my own, you know, cases of it. But just to add something different to the conversation outside of my own cases with it, is that as problematic as what we've just described is, the overt impacts of racism and systemic racism, police stops, et cetera, I think what is as, or perhaps even more, is the microaggressions, the micro invalidations, the micro insults that happen on a daily basis, which never get reported, right? Unless, like this young man, Machi, you know, reported, you know, someone who was doing something that, you know, wasn't maybe big, but it was a micro aggression, a micro invalidation, or micro insult. Those are the kind of things that go on all the time. And Wendy knows, as being a person of color in corporate as I have been, we see it we've seen it all the time in corporate. We see it in life. And so this issue is not being made up. This is like really real stuff. I'll never forget. Here's one example. I was opening up a diversity class some years ago with a bunch of senior leaders, predominantly white males. And one of them walked up to me afterwards and said, "Marvin, when you were up there talking, I didn't see you as Black. I saw you as one of us because you talk like one of us." That's real. I've never forgotten that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's kind of difficult not to see me as Black, right? I mean, there's not, Mr. Gomez, there's not any any ambiguity here, right?
I'm not confused.
No ambiguity here, right? So for someone to say that is like really interesting. So why would you not see me as Black, right? Is there something that would happen to you if you saw me as Black? But then the other piece, the kind of micro invalidation piece and the microaggression and the micro assault was, you talk like one of us. I didn't see you as Black because you talk like one of us.
He was complimenting you in his eyes.
It was an incredible attempt at his to compliment me. It was an incredible attempt. It really was, Wendy. And I knew it. But he didn't know that he was also, that was another micro assault, another micro invalidation, another microaggression. These are things that people of color, people who are different, experience all the time.
You know, hi guys. Can you hear me? Dave, can you hear me? Thumbs up. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't have a camera. I'm Jim McKay. I'm the superintendent for those of you that don't know me. I'm so happy to be with you tonight. Powerful stories tonight. And I wanted to just interject just a little bit here. When you think of a public institution, like a public education institution, just historically where 117 has come from. You know, Dave will recall these sorts of conversations never existed prior to about maybe 3 years ago. And some of you may know at one time I was the principal of Lakes High School. And I remember something that has stuck with me ever since. We gave out a survey to our kids, to our students, and our colored students came back in this survey and said they didn't feel included, right? You know, everybody that's been in Lakes High School, it's a beautiful facility. It's a gorgeous place. And you would think that it's a place where everyone can learn without any inhibition. Well, that's not the case, right? We were getting responses from our kids that were saying, you know what, I really don't feel included in this building. And it was Dave and I. Dave, you may recall this, that we looked at each other and when we said, so what are we missing, right? And we needed to begin this slow inroads into how do you change a school system? And so here we are, guys. The journey has brought us a long ways. And I would tell you that the district, and perhaps the students don't know this necessarily, but the district has invested for probably 5 or 6 years now in how do we make our learning environments more inclusive. And so the next step for District 117 will be to do more training for our teachers, because I think Asra said, you know, largely we have white teachers. And we need to allow those teachers to learn more about who they're teaching. And so I thought I might just put that out there. One of the things I talked to some of our kids of color when I was the principal, and some of them would say stuff like, you know, their friends would say, well, hey, wetback, or that's so gay, and they're walking down the hallway and no teacher stops that sort of language. Well, we have to stop that sort of language, right? That's where the rubber meets the road in passing periods. If our classroom educators can stop that and take it very, very seriously at the time that it's said, we can begin to make some of those inroads.
Thank you all for sharing. I have a question for Mr. Gomez. Being a Lakes alumni and now a teacher at Lakes, what changes can District 117 enact to foster a better sense of inclusion and acceptance within our community?
Let's see, I have my teacher hat on. I think for me, I think given my unique perspective, as being a former student of Lakes, I think for me it comes down to what teachers can do in the everyday is the curriculum and the topics that are and subject matter that is being discussed in classes. And so like that's not obviously realistic in every subject. So for example, math and physics, I think it's a lot tougher for teachers and those subject areas to create a more like a diverse or inclusive curriculum. I'm sure it's possible. I don't know. I don't know, but I know that for social studies teachers and English teachers, that's definitely possible. I remember my sophomore year being in English 2 class, and I'm forgetting my teacher's name. She's no longer at Lakes. But we were learning about or reading about like it was a whole gigantic unit on Ernest Shackleton. So it's this gentleman who was the first to reach Antarctica, and the whole time I was just like, why does this guy matter? Like, why are we reading about him? Why are we learning about Ernest Shackleton? Like,
Yes.
how does that have any impact on anything? And at the time, like, once I got to high school, so, I think what pushed me towards becoming a history teacher is because of my dad. And so like my dad's forte was like he'd either teach me about the Aztec Empire and the Mesoamerican civilizations, or he's a big Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Yeah, and so like in my mind, I was like, I want to be learning about Malcolm X or like just someone like interesting and captivating, like going on a ship to the Arctic, like that does nothing for me. And so trying to figure out what moves kids and try to cater to their interests and interests of students who are not are not in the majority. One, it engages the students who are in the minority, regardless of what sort of diverse background we're talking about. And two, it gives the opportunity to for the students in the majority to learn about the minority. All right. And so that in itself becomes engaging for them because it's like, oh, I never knew, fact XYZ. Like, and so for me, the biggest steps that the district can make is looking at curriculum and what subject matter is being talked about with an emphasis on like student interests, whether it's through a district-wide survey or teachers just engaging in discussions with students and kind of picking out by the end of the year, well, like what were some of the topics that kids were really interested about. Like to me, student-led curriculum building is what I kind of see as the future in terms of accomplishing these goals on inclusion and diversity. So yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez.
Can I hop in for a second, Stacy? Yeah. Mr. Gomez, can you share a little bit about the class you're going to teach next year?
Yeah, for sure. So with that said, I proposed a class last year, I think, but it was like 2 years in the making. So next year I'll be teaching a class called, Modern America Through Pop Culture. It's the title of the class. And so essentially what we'll be doing is learning about the United States post-civil rights era. All right, so we're going to pick up right in the early 70s, look at movements, the Native American movement, LGBTQ, up and through the 80s with the war on drugs and mass incarceration, to the rise of hip hop, to the LA riots, to the war on terror and the 2008 and 2016 presidential elections. And there's other topics within there, but being a U.S. history teacher, we never get to spend the amount of time on like more post civil rights or post Vietnam. We don't get enough time there. And so I figured there would be no better way to do that than to create a class where we learn about these more controversial issues that are more impactful to our students in their lives, because, say what you will, but George Washington isn't going to be as interesting to someone born in 2008 as President Obama or Donald Trump. So we're gonna learn about these controversial topics, looking at pop culture. So what we see in the media, whether it's movies, television, music. I have several assignments where we'll be breaking down lyrics of popular musicians from like Tupac to Kendrick Lamar. So I mean that's kind of the essence of the class. It's just using pop culture and what students engage with to learn about modern history.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez.
So, okay. Aryanne, from a high school student's perspective, what changes can District 117 enact to foster a better sense of inclusion and acceptance within our community? And what advice would you give to others who may be experiencing some challenges that you may have experienced over the years?
So for the first question, much like what Mr. Gomez said, it's just probably teaching students, education about other things. Like I noticed at Lakes, we teach AP US history and European history, but yet we do not have a class that, teaches students about specifically like Asian American history. I know like growing up, I knew nothing about what happened in the Philippines or my ancestors. My parents would have to teach me that. And just in general, just like Hispanic American history. I feel like definitely growing up, I felt isolated from my culture because I knew nothing about it. Because the area I personally grew up in, I would never learn about, famous like Asian leaders or anything like that. I would learn about the US. So I feel like, helping students to be educated about in general rather than what happens in the US is like definitely a step to take. For students who are going through stuff similar as me, I think definitely up until my sophomore year of high school, I think I struggled with my identity. I could not tell, I struggled between being like American or Asian. Like I felt like as if I could not embrace both. I felt very like isolated. And I think from being in FASA and talking to people who have had similar experiences to me, I think I definitely learned that I can be both, I don't have to choose a side. Both sides are beautiful and everything, and you shouldn't ever feel the need to change who you are just because others are different than you. So yeah.
Thank you. So now we're gonna ask each of you panelists for a quick closing statement to close up our event. Real quick, so can we start with Mr. Gomez? Any statements?
Yeah, I would say, and again, this is just me being a history teacher, but I think in order to like truly progress, and I think we're taking the right steps towards it. I think anyone trying to, or who is engaging in this, I guess, struggle to achieve inclusion and diversity. The best thing you can do is open a history book and learn why things are the way they are. What events and what systems have been put in place, what actors have participated in, the sorts of things that, we're seeing today. And that way, that's going to help us better understand how to not make those same mistakes or choose, make the wrong decisions as we move forward.
Thank you. Ms. Willis, any statements you would like to add?
I just want to know, we all navigate through the crazy personal issues and racism that is really off the chart at the moment. So that's a challenge in itself. But my comment is more specific to corporate America because it is not for the thin-skinned or the lighthearted. As African American, it really is a battleground. So when you get there, I used to, you say mentors, but I sort of have a board of mentors, different people. The trick is finding someone that you trust and is honest with you. One thing you will find in corporate America that most people don't give you the truth when you're Black because they're scared of offending you, so they won't give you actual real feedback. So you have to, find someone who you trust. So, white, Black, not all Black mentors are actually helpful either. So you just have to find the people who will be supportive of you and who will give you the truth and help you navigate through that, through the different trials that you may have. So it's definitely a worthwhile career for those who are interested in it, but you certainly could use some help along the way. So you definitely have to find those who you can depend on and who can trust you, who you can trust.
Thanks. Machi, any statements?
One thing I will say, I agree with Mr. Gomez that this is definitely a step in the right direction. Actually, that's what I was going to bring up. When I was in Kenosha, mind you, they pretty much for that place. But one thing I noticed is the businesses there, they did not remove the Black Lives Matter like spray painting that was on their building, or like the Black Lives Matter posters on their like businesses. They kind of just function around it. And I bring that up to say that racism is a thing, regardless of whether people think it or not. There is definitely stereotypes over not only African Americans but Asian Americans, Latino Americans, Pakistanis. There's so many different things that people kind of just go with. So I would really just say education is key. Education on culture, education on background, education on all those things that will really help.
Thank you. Miss Christella, any closing statements? Cherestal?
Yeah, so I want to add something as an educator's point of view, and just something that I unconsciously have been guilty of myself. I think it's really important as educators to not be okay with failure of student of color, students with disability, low-income students, students from single-parent home, to challenge the normalization of that and figure out what support systems need in place, and look at success stories and do more. From our side, I think we all have responsibility. And to my students from different backgrounds, like, keep your head high and always know you belong, no matter your background and your past experiences. Don't ever let anyone else define your worth. Like, you define your worth wherever you go. Just know that.
Thank you. Aryanne, any closing statements?
I think much like what I said before, it's goes out to more like first generation, or just like anything like that. Like, be okay with embracing both sides. I think embracing your culture is like one of the most important things you can do, and don't be ashamed of it, and don't try to close off on it, because you will regret it for sure. And in general, like what everyone has been saying, education is so important when it comes to stuff like this. If we're not, what I think of is, if we can't be taught it in the classroom, educate yourself. Take the time to learn about other cultures, other races, and other backgrounds, and I think that will go a very long way for you.
Thank you. Ms. Barbatos, any closing statements?
Sure. I just want to first of all say thank you for inviting me. I am humbled and honored to be on this panel of esteemed participants. I also, just a quick suggestion, if I think that this is a great event and it should occur more regularly. I think that the more people that can hear these stories, and thank you for sharing, all of you, your personal stories. I know sometimes, coming from a therapist point of view, sometimes sharing them is not so easy, and sometimes it can bring up emotions that are difficult. So I thank you for sharing them for everybody to understand better. And the more that can happen, I think the more we can understand each other as human beings. And along those lines, as coming from higher ed, I do put on different events like this. And one way we get more people to come is our teachers or faculty members offer it as extra credit for classes. So next time you have something like this, maybe offer it as extra credit for your classes, and you'll get some students and maybe some more participation and conversation, because the more people that we can reach, maybe, we'll have more understanding. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you. And Mr. Bembry, any closing statements?
Sure. Well, I want to thank all of you, young people, students who are leading this, facilitating it, the Principal Newberry, Dr. McKay, for your leadership in putting something like this on and creating an opportunity for people like that are on this panel. And I want to thank all of the panelists too for your contributions. But these kind of courageous conversations is such a huge step forward. And it's a step forward for my generation. It's a step forward for younger and emerging generations. So this is wonderful, and I'm excited to be a part of it. I would just make two final comments, and that would be this. One, I want to encourage us all, and those who are watching and those who will see this later, our commitment has to be stronger and greater than ever before. The commitment is really to being anti-racist versus not a racist, or as a politician recently said, the least racist person around. In order for us to really move this forward, we have to make a commitment to being anti-racist. And for those of you that are in the work, those of you that are experiencing this moment of reckoning for our country, may I just suggest, let's just be strong, don't give up. The road is long and circuitous, tumultuous, as we've seen over the last year, but a world that creates an environment of equity, diversity, and inclusion is worth it. So don't give up. Let's keep on marching on. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to quickly introduce myself. So I'm Stacy. I'm a sophomore, and I'm one of the co-founders of Diversity Ambassadors. I'm going to lend it over to Lauren to quickly introduce herself and for her closing statements.
Hi, so I'm Lauren, one of the co-founders of the Diversity Ambassadors, and well, I'm a senior / alum now, but I'm really appreciative of all of you guys coming and just sharing your stories. I think it was really important for me personally going to Lakes and being one of the only African American students or students of color in academic spaces to have these discussions, because normally they're really not hush-hush, but sort of during when I was in school mainly. So now that with all the social unrest going on, it's really just nice to hear other people and their experiences and how they're feeling. So yeah, just really appreciative, honestly. So thank you everyone for coming. And and Mr. Newberry, because speaking on that, like Mr. Newberry, I thought I really didn't expect for his response to be as welcoming and understanding as it was. And I'm forever grateful to him for just how just nice he's been about everything and trying to help push diversity and equality and equity within Lakes. I think that's just really commendable. So I wanted to say that.
Thank you, Lauren. Go ahead, Yumna.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm Yumna. I am also a senior and co-founder of the Diversity Ambassadors program. I would also like to extend my thanks to Mr. Newberry, as well as all of the panelists in attendance and the rest of the ambassadors. And on behalf of the Diversity Ambassadors program, I would like to thank all of the speakers tonight, the administrators, teachers, community members, educators, students, graduates, and attendees for joining us today. We encourage you to engage in acts promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, whether that be starting a dialogue, donating to a charitable cause, or even simply furthering your own education, as you all did today. Through these actions, we can and will uphold the values of Lakes Community High School, of respect, courtesy, and pride together. Thank you for your time, and have a great rest of your day.